Interview advice. Tomorrow morning, I have an interview for an internship position at my dream company. What advice do you have for me? All right, so here is my approach to internship interviews. So this is likely your first interview. So the majority of the questions are going to be about you and who you are. They're trying to see if you're a culture fit. That's usually what the first interview is. So you're going to get questions about things like, hey, tell me about a time you worked in a group. Tell me about a time where you worked in a group where people maybe didn't agree with one another or there was conflict. Tell me about a time where, all the tell me about a time questions. Basically trying to see if you're going to be a locker room cancer, as us sport fans would say. Like, are you going to bring bad vibes into the office? And if you don't bring bad vibes into the office and the interviewer just generally finds you a pleasant person to talk to, which might sound crazy, but that's kind of the criteria, then you might get a follow-up interview with maybe the hiring manager, or if you interviewed with the internship program manager the first time, then you might be interviewing with a career person in their employment group, or vice versa. If you interviewed with a recruiter the first time, then maybe you'll interview with the actual internship program coordinator the second time. So yeah, be prepared for a behavioral-based interview, and you can probably even ask the person that's interviewing you in advance, like, hey, just so I make sure that I'm prepared, what's the subject matter of the interview? Is it, and then they can say, oh, it's behavioral, and maybe they won't even say that. Maybe they won't. Maybe don't ask for that. But I don't know. Wouldn't be the worst thing to ask. Hey, what kind of topics are generally covered in the first interview? Maybe some recruiters out here will come on and comment and say that that's not the right thing to say. But I don't personally see why there would be any issue with saying that. So. What's your weakness? I just think that's such a basic question, but people probably still ask that. What's one of your weaknesses and what do you do? But remember, you end with a positive spin, this is how I'm working on it or whatever. But yeah, so just be prepared for behavioral based interview questions, and also come prepared. And you said it's your dream company, so I'm pretty sure that you're not going to have this issue, but you should go into your internship interviews having already applied for the position, which you're getting interviewed, so I guess it's more career fair applicable, but you want to have a general understanding of what the company does and a basic understanding of what that role does. So, for example, if you're going to become a production engineering intern, then you'd go on Google and say, what does a production engineer do? So that way, whenever you're asking questions, you're not saying, hey, so what is a production engineer? You say, hey, so I'm not exactly sure what a production engineer does, but I looked into it and I think that production engineers do this. Is that what production engineers do at your company? And is that what I would be doing as an intern? And what that does is it does two things. First of all, they don't have to spend a significant portion of the interview explaining to you what the internship is and what the company and what the role does. Secondly, it shows that you show initiative. Again, we talked about this earlier in the podcast, but you don't want to be the person asking level 1 questions or questions that you didn't have a chance to research yourself. So they're probably going to want to know, they're going to know that you want to know what a production engineer does for the company. So at least have done the bare minimum in figuring out what generally production engineers do. Or for example, say it's Lockheed Martin. Maybe you should go into the interview knowing that for the most part, Lockheed Martin, one of their biggest bread and butters is they make planes. And those planes are called like the F-16, the F-18, the F-22, the F-33. Sorry, F-35. I'm sorry. Dad, forgive me. But yeah, so, the stuff that anybody should generically know if they had the most basic level understanding of what the company was, you should go up into that interview knowing that. And you said it's your dream company, so I'm not as worried about that for you. But yeah, that is what I'd say I would work on as an internship. Be prepared for behavioral-based questions. Do some research so that you can ask some level 2 questions. Or, I don't know what a level 1 and a level 2 question is, but yeah, don't ask what is a production engineer. Ask, hey, I research production engineers, this is what I think they do. Is this what they do? Keep the conversation as much on you being a fit for the role, not them trying to explain what the role is. So whenever they explain what a production engineer does, then respond by saying, hey, oh, I like that. I think I'd be a good fit for that because of this, and this. And then lastly, I'll close out with this. One piece of advice that everybody keeps on pointing to is called the STAR interview method. And the STAR interview method is as I'm going to show on the screen here. So this is the STAR. It's loading. But the STAR method is a method for responding to interview questions. And if it doesn't open in the next 2 minutes and 2 seconds, I'm going to open up another article. So this is an article from the Muse. And I'm going to skip. Oh, I don't want to sign up. Skip down. So STAR stands for situation. Set the scene and give the necessary details of your example. T, task. Describe what your responsibility was in that situation. A, action. Explain exactly what steps you took to address it. R, share what outcomes your actions achieved. For example, Daniel, tell us about a time that you dealt with stinky cat poo while doing a podcast. How did you react? Situation. Well, I was sitting in my guest room and I was recording an episode of the Engineering Success Podcast, which is my podcast where I talk about career advice. And this lovely cat named Clementine that we're helping cat sit for in this room took a dump. And obviously I had the responsibility of continuing to record my podcast, but also I really wanted to have a good environment to record my podcast in, and that environment needed to be free of cat poo. Action. So the steps I took was I found a natural breaking point in the episode of the podcast, an ad break after the first segment of my podcast. I stopped recording and I went out and cleaned out the litter box and took the cat poo outside and threw it away outside. R, result. The outcome is that I was able to continue recording my podcast without any issues. And, well, I got interrupted later, but other than that, I didn't have to deal with the stinky cat poo smell anymore. So that's STAR. Situation, task. My responsibility was to record an episode of my podcast. Action, I took the step to take that poo out. Result, share what outcomes your actions achieved. And if you can formulate all your responses in that method, it gives you... that way you're not in a position where you're having to rove around and your response is kind of all over the place. STAR gives you the framework to respond. And that's how all of your responses to questions, and if you want to be an effective communicator, using STAR or just, again, having planned structured to how you speak is how you become a more effective communicator and how you do well in interviews. And it's why I record this podcast. You might not be able to see it because I'm still working on that skill, but I am using STAR or I call it table topics. So I'm using my table topic skills, so my quick reaction skills, to practice coming up with structured responses to questions on the fly. That's why I record this podcast, and because I care about other people's careers. But working on that skill makes you an effective communicator. That's why I do this podcast, because I believe in it. Thanks for watching this segment of the Engineering Success Podcast. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. All those things really help me out. They boost me up in the YouTube algorithm, and they'll help other people see this great content. Make sure to recommend the podcast to your friends. You can listen to it on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere else you get your podcasts content from. And make sure you leave me 5-star reviews, like all my videos, and consider subscribing on Patreon or Anchor. All those things help me out, and I really appreciate it. Catch you in the next one.
Never losing focus because I ain't chasing payment. Still playing in the basement while I'm working on arrangements. They heard the kid in 50 countries, thank God that's amazing. But I'd rather thank Spotify, they put me on the station.